Welcome to episode 72 of the Creative Train podcast. I'm calling this one The Promise, Part 2. I didn't intend for episode 71 to be a part 1, but I've been through a few things professionally this past few weeks that kind of pointed to this being the next episode. In the previous episode, I talked about my experiences as both a student and a teacher, and how my teacher brain was fueled during a recent experience as a student. The focus was on the teacher-student dynamic and the sometimes unspoken promise we should make to one another. I need to take this point a bit further now, as things became a bit terse and kind of personal with a now departed student. All aboard? Over the 34 years that I've been teaching music, I've encountered what I might confidently say pretty much every type of student. From the shy and timid 4-year-old to the super confident teen to the astoundingly arrogant adult beginner. The prodigious to the profoundly lazy, the intuitive to the needy, and to the technician, to the totally free spirit, the open-minded to the completely closed. Anyway, all of these labels can be found in any age group, really. Nothing is particularly unique about someone's age versus their ability or level of interest. But when I am approached as a teacher, hired for or tasked with teaching, demonstrating, or assisting, I guarantee that my students will receive 100% of my effort and attention while we're together. This is not always the case with all teacher types or student types. Some are fully engaged, and some just kind of check in every so often if you're in a classroom setting. But in a one-on-one setting, it's much harder for either one to be only partially present and not give away that they are so. In a recent experience, I had a very nice older lady send me an email. She asked if I teach piano by the book or just for fun. And I assured her that I can do and do, I said do, both. But it depends on what the student would like to learn. My focus is helping the student attain their goals. She said that she'd been playing for a number of years, but never learned to read music and would really like some help to learn how to read music finally. So we set her up with a time to come in and got her booked in for 5 weeks of lessons to start. The great part of learning to read music and study theory when you already know how to play is that there's very little time spent on the technicalities of playing any instrument, and that my time can be more focused on the reading, the score, the theoretical concepts, or whatever the topic du jour happens to be. And I have to say that her playing ability was very impressive. She'd been playing by ear most of her life after a few years of lessons in her teens. Now, approaching 60, as she said, in the retirement phase of her life, she was open and willing and wanted a new challenge. She knew the notes, she knew a bunch of chords, but didn't really know how or why the notes or chords worked together. And she'd even gone as far as composing a few original pieces that I really actually liked. When I asked her how she filed these things away in her mind, how she remembered them, without really knowing what to call the chords or the melodic movements in regular musical terms, she went off in a mind-bending explanation that left me kind of stunned. For close to an hour, she described how she thinks of the notes, the patterns she thinks are there, and how she thinks they correlate. She drew diagrams, made lists, and almost talked herself into exhaustion during that hour. And we were no further ahead in her goals than the moment she first walked through the door. I'll admit it, it was fascinating and a really valuable insight for me as a teacher to be witness to these, I'll call them bizarre systems that she had put into place. But if she was to use actual music theory, it would all be so much simpler and could be supported by hundreds of years of written music that she would soon hopefully be able to enjoy playing and understanding. But it didn't quite go that way. I suggested that in order for her to learn to read music, which was initially her goal in signing up for lessons, that she get one of those adult beginner books and we work through it together. As an adjunct, we could check out other music along the way that I know that she might be into that would be appropriate for her reading level, but not feel so instructional. She really liked that idea. I told her she could burn through the first few chapters in a week because she already understood how to play. So I sent her a few links to books that I thought she would really get something out of. And she was totally stoked to get going the following week. However, a few weeks went by and the book never materialized. I had written some basic charts by hand and printed out a few public domain songs for her to try. But the system or the method that she tried to impose was that I first demonstrate and then she would repeat what I did while pretending to read the music. And it wasn't until I inserted some deliberate errors that were different from the written music that I realized she had no idea what was on the sheet and was just following what she saw that I first played. Now, this is common practice in beginner students. I even did it myself as a young guitar student, and I see it a lot when it comes to the student actually having to do something independent of my co-playing of the music with them. In those kind of cases, they will either be reliably one beat behind or so as they copy my playing, or they will ask me to repeat the passages so that they can visually absorb what I am doing, not what's on the sheet. In doing this, folks will usually pick up on how to play a piece on their own. But that's not really me doing my job of teaching someone how to read and follow lead sheets or charts, meaning sheet music. When I kind of called her out on this, she then insisted that I explain the process in her own terms. Those wildly fantastic, nebulous, and bizarre diagrams she was showing me, and I really didn't understand where she was coming from with those. They made sense to her. But if I'm to explain things in proper, or rather established musical terms, they weren't applicable in her words or terms or method. And honestly, I was as lost as she was. There was zero effort on her part to engage in the specifics of what I was hired to show her. Instead, she turned it on me that I was now expected to immerse myself in her world of incorrect nomenclature and regurgitate the works of the masters in terms she could more easily grasp. Now, if she was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I would have made more of a concerted effort to enter her world, but she wanted to immerse herself in the long-established world of music reading, music theory, and bringing her playing and understanding to new levels. And I just could not relate at all to the things she was asking me to understand. Her discomfort turned into demands for me to comply, and I just could not find a way to associate the simplest let alone the more complex musical things she wanted to understand in the ways that she had come to understand the piano in her own way. Our sessions became a swirling, disorganized mess of ever more confusing analogies and descriptions from her, which I don't have the facility to really understand. And it's not like she was talking above my level of understanding, nor was she talking below it, but more me having to come to an understanding that she was not actually interested in learning the things she said she wanted to learn. It was more like her seeking validation for her reasoning and approach. I think that because I couldn't grasp her method of understanding, she thought I was unable to actually fulfill my end of the deal, which initially was teaching her how to read standard musical notation, not finding a way to put into words the things that she barely understood herself. That would be like me wanting to learn conversational Korean, or, study the language fully from alphabet to phonetics to grammar, and expecting that if I was to have the teacher screaming at me the whole time in their native language, that somehow the constant insistence of their voice would permeate my mind and turn into understanding. It's weird. It can't happen. You have to immerse yourself in the language. I knew that there was a very active, if not even hyperactive mind behind her system of understanding. A lazy person simply would not have put that much effort into drawing these elaborate diagrams and system pages. But I now realize we were just two folks who were or are or were not at all on the same page. As a musical intuitive, she has wonderful and amazing insight. But the discipline of reading music from a sheet is very, very different from that. In fact, you could say it's closed off from that, if I could be so definitive to say that. Perhaps I could see that as a failing on my part as a music teacher, that I couldn't wrap my brain around her inner workings. I've often thought of that as kind of being my superpower of sorts, being able to understand how each student needs to learn. Not only how I need to explain things to them in the verbiage that they can relate to, but how I, myself, must conduct myself in order to earn, maintain, and enhance our trust, understanding, and mutual respect, regardless of the student's age or experience. Now, I don't really think I can blame myself too much in this case. I really thought she wanted something, and I understand now that she didn't really understand the potential scope of what she thought she wanted. An artist's intuition can carry them for many years, sometimes their entire life or career. But especially in something like music with a very rich and what can often be a very pedagogical history, that when you want to dig into the really, really nitty-gritty bits of it, it requires a lot of discipline on your part. Music, in many cases, is a language based upon and experienced in open discussion, playing, jamming, whatever you want to call it. But in just as many cases, it's a language built upon some very particular rules around its method of sharing, and in which things like actual physical documentation on paper are not only just handy or convenient, but are absolutely necessary. There are countless amazing players and songwriters who claim to have no formal music study, and that's fine. I get it. Neither did I. But at some point, we all came to the same understanding of the how and what, and hopefully why music works in our own terms. If you can pick up your instrument or sit down at your instrument and play and be happy and inspire your listeners and all that good stuff, perfect. It's worked for centuries and will continue to do so if my dreams come true. But, and this is a big but, LOL, when you enter into the process of studying the history of whatever your preferred art form is, you in some way have to submit to the history of the greats that have come before you. Their successes, their failures, and especially the written records they left behind for any and all of those who follow. You owe it to the art form to try on those methods at least and see if they fit. You owe it to yourself and your creativity to willingly engage with those methods by first admitting that there are those from whom you can learn. So my student that was talking about earlier sent me a very brief message last week saying they are ending our sessions. And I was kind of bummed about this. At the same time, I was kind of relieved. I had exhausted every teacher riff in my mind and heart and soul. And I could see the writing on the wall, but I had no idea where to go with this person. In closing, if you, as an artist, technician of any kind, are totally confident in your abilities, directions, and goals without having to study anything to get you further, then carry on. Godspeed to you. But if you find yourself wanting or seeking more, then open yourself to possibilities, to the idea of new processes and understandings. Don't expect the entire history of these things to first pass through your needle eye of discernment before you determine them to be worthy of your attention, effort, or at the least, your respect and acknowledgement. Oosh. There's your pep talk. Now go learn something. Go get to work. You might think from that episode's reading that I'm bitter, and I'm not. I'm not at all. I found it to be one of the more fascinating months of my career as a music teacher, but I also found myself butting heads with someone who thought they already knew more than everybody else because they had gotten to this point in their life with no really formal instruction. But when you come to somebody who has studied more than you and you want to learn from them about the things they've studied, stop, take a moment to listen. You might learn something, and you might be a more happy artist as a result of listening and learning.